I'm Megan Skidmore, and welcome to the Beyond the Shadow of Doubt. I'm a woman, daughter, sister, spouse, mother, life coach, and person of faith on a mission to normalize asking questions and allowing doubts on a faith journey and all aspects of life. Join me as I bring this traditionally taboo topic out of the shadows of shame and into the light. I firmly believe we normalize through more talking and engaging in discussion. More talking peels back, exposes, and erases the layers of shame associated with asking questions and allowing doubts. When we are more authentic about our journey, we are more powerful because shame has no power in the face of authenticity. Beyond the Shadow of Doubt is a proud member of the Dialogue Podcast Network, which is part of the Dialogue Journal found at dialoguejournal.com/podcast. Founder Eugene England was a Mormon writer, teacher, and scholar who wrote, "My faith encourages my curiosity and awe. It thrusts me out into relationship with all creation and encourages me to enter into dialogue. My hope is that this podcast is an extension of that vision." Come get coached or learn from watching others get coached. Starting January 2024, I am starting First Friday's free coaching. A faith journey brings a lot of emotions. I am creating a confidential group to bring all of not just the emotions and process them, but bring all the questions, vent frustrations, share fears, express doubts. Navigating a new and uncertain reality is hard enough. Let's remove the worry of judgment from others. In this group, I will help you help yourself so that you can be there for your child, family, loved ones, and for you too. Click the link in the show notes to sign up. You must complete the agreement and survey.
I grew up with big dreams. Like I used to think I'd be the first female president of the United States. And then I kind of
love that so much.
And reality hit. And I realized that actually, some people can do a lot in that position, but I learned that for me, I can create the most change working from the ground up rather than the top down. And very quickly, I turned in this space when my son came out. I turned to people who'd been there before. And I read everything I could. I started listening. It was during COVID. So we had a lot of solitary time where I would go on these long bike rides and I'd listen to all of Richard Ostler's podcast. And I read all these books and I would talk to any parent I could get the phone to answer, who had been through this before, or just to learn, how can I do this well? How can I be the best, rainbow mama out there, and also trying to listen to my son and take his cues, but quickly realizing that not everyone was on the same page. And we definitely had close friendships that pulled away for sure. Absolutely. Some of them were really deep betrayals that, I've heard some of my closest friends who would help me raise this child, I've heard things they've said about us or me, and it's, it's hurtful and it's hard to get over.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, it's okay. And I luckily have a great therapist who really was so wise. She's the voice in my head. And one time she told me, I recognize that person in your life might be a great person, but they're not, because I was trying to defend some of these people's behavior. They're probably doing it because this or that. She said, I recognize they may be a great person in their space, but they're not a great friend for you right now. And I learned to kind of put up walls and protection and like a fortress. And it was such a great year to do that, where we were all home so much and we could build those walls and redefine our life. We did move during that year as well. And I was able to take up in a new community. I now live in the LDS framework, the zoning where I am. The wards tend to be a little bit more open and a little bit more, especially in my ward, the leadership in my ward right now, I would say are very more progressive. And I'm not saying churches is an easy place for me. I don't think most people would say that I'm the person on the front row at all at church anymore. But I do feel like it's a little more laid back where I live now, that people have respected where we're at. I did have several leaders who wanted to meet with us, and we talked to them about various things. Some conversations went much better than others. I quickly had to learn who I could trust. And what I found was, at first, it's funny because places like going to a temple where there's a rote ritual and a script that is going to be said was less scary than going to a church meeting where you don't know what might be said. So it was kind of interesting because I started having a pretty open conduit to the above the divine, where I would have very strong like promptings or words that would come to me that were so clear. And they were completely different than anything you would think you had heard in Sunday school growing up. Things like, it's okay for you to leave. It's okay for you to walk out. It's okay for you to, you're doing okay. Like your son's fine. Like just things that like, I stopped worrying about things. And as I did that more and more, I realized my job right now is to protect my family. And so things became more insular in our community because of where I work at the resource center. That has become, when I turn to scripture, I turn to the gospels. I like Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John the best. That's generally my practice with scriptures.
I love that.
I love that. And it's just Jesus. That phrase, just Jesus, always goes through my head, where I just want some Jesus. And I just go straight to the source. And I am not somebody now who is picking up talks or speeches from other people that might be triggering. I just kind of go to Jesus. What did Jesus do? And luckily we have this amazing place in our town where I can work, and I get to just try to be the hands on the ground and helping. We help refugees. We help women in crisis from domestic violence. We help people who are hungry constantly every single day. The place I volunteer is feeding somebody who's hungry. And life gets very simple when you focus on the just Jesus aspect of it. Like your religious practice can be very simple. And I've been so immensely blessed in many ways to be able to like offer resources and time in my community in a way where I feel a pretty steady flow of spirit in a way that works for me. And so when church is an uncomfortable place for me, I don't feel like I've lost out necessarily on something that used to mean a lot, because church was always something for me that was beyond a building or beyond a wall or beyond a certain practice. So I recognize that is unique in that my mom raised us that way. And I know a lot of people, I'm a volunteer coordinator for a few groups here, and a lot of people come to me and say, how did you know how to do this? I was raised that way. So I recognize that's like a privilege to have grown up in this world where you know how to do it. But when people are becoming insular and depressed or having a hard time, first thing I do is like, it's true, so true. Get outside your own self. Like, where can you serve? Where can you give? And I know you do so much of that, in your community, and just where can you give back? So that's kind of what I put my time into. And so as a volunteer now, like I run a couple support groups. We have a group called Just Love that meets once a month at my house in a lunch capacity for women. And then we also have activities in the evenings. We've had speakers come in. We've had, Charlie and Ben came earlier this year. We've had we did a youth panel with them. Some of the local high school kids, including mine, helped run that. And we had about 400 local teenagers come to that. And that was an amazing
fantastic.
It was really great. And then, we've had speakers. We've had Pastor Stan Mitchell, who I adore. I love him.
Really? You've had him come out?
Yeah, he's come to my house and spoken, and we're pretty good friends. I support his ministry. I love him.
That's fantastic. Yeah, I love him too. I haven't met him, but I love.
He's wonderful. So, and he works a lot with people in this space, obviously, but so we've created these community events. I also helped start a book club locally with, I really like a podcast called the Faith Matters podcast.
Yep.
And we have a Faith Matters book club, and a lot of people in our community, it's not LGBTQ centric, but a lot of people in our community who are looking for more expansive faith. We show up, I think there's 30 or 40, 50 people in our group, and we read and study some of those authors and books. And that's been really great. And then of course, I write the stories for Lift and Love, which is a site that's an intersection for LDS and LGBTQ. And every single week I meet and interview a different family and get to learn from them. And I can't even tell you how much it's meant to me to be able to, people say, oh, thanks for doing that. I'm like, no, you don't even know. Like, I learned so much from these families. I'm selfish in that it's something I love to do because I learned so much. And I feel like I have friends all over the world now, people I've met through it. So
that is fantastic.
So our group is big. There's a lot of people who support us in this space. And I've definitely strengthened some friendships that have been very needed. And I definitely right now in my life am happier than I've ever been. And I feel more love and peace and joy than I've ever felt. And my religious life does not look like that of one that some people might wish their kids' lives looked like. But in terms of like the Sunday practice only, but I'm trying to make my Christianity a 24/7 thing the best I know how. And I'm certainly not perfect, but I am trying to like think outside the box there.
Well, I think you said it best when you said church for me has always gone beyond the building. And if that's true, it only makes sense that your day-to-day life embodies your spirituality, right? You don't, from what I can see and hear and what I know of you, you are doing it on a day-to-day basis. You're not limited to just practicing or observing or whatever, worshiping on Sunday inside of a building. And I think that's okay. I think that's part of what your journey is. And I think there's many out there who embody that. I think Christ did that. And I love that you said how Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John are your favorite, because they're just Jesus. And it reminded me, you wrote a book. Did it? And I don't think it was called Just Jesus, but it was something like that. Can you share a little more about that?
Sure. Yeah. My most recent book is called But Jesus, A Conversation.
Jesus.
Yeah.
I can just hear the little inner child Autumn saying, but Jesus.
Right. But Jesus. It's funny. The book came to me 100% through inspiration, like to the point where I've written a lot of things, but I've never written something where I know my fingers were on the keyboard. It's stored in my computer, but I was just a medium. That book came straight from above in terms of, I was told very clearly how, when, why to write it, what exactly to do with it. And even the title came to me in like this, I saw the title and I was like, okay, grammatically, how do you punctuate that so it makes sense to the lay reader? I was thinking about technical things, but that title was supposed to be the title. And I thought, okay, well, I've got to make it work. But it's like, yeah, but Jesus. And it's this, I kind of have this inner dialogue. My prayer looks different. I don't like it when people ask me to pray in public, because I've never been comfortable with that institutional, how you were taught to pray as a child. Many of us were taught like, it's these 4 steps of prayer,
Yes.
And this has never worked for me. And my prayer is this like inner dialogue I constantly have going, like,
me too. Me
Jesus.
too. Yeah. And that's been my story even since before I started on this journey. Like, I mean, honestly, my whole life, the more I understood prayer, there's not a beginning or an end necessarily to the conversation.
And I feel so awkward when people say, can you pray? And I'm like out loud. And then sometimes if it's people I know, I'm like, can I pray how I pray? And they're like, what is that? And it's very different. It's like this running conversation we're constantly having. But the book came in that way. It came so clearly.
Awesome.
And the impetus of it was actually a very sad evening for us. It was a speaker had come to our local, like a gathering of youth, a state conference. And I was one of the speakers at it. And then a man from Salt Lake had come, and his talk. So my gay son hadn't gone to any religious meetings since he'd come out about 4 months earlier. And he decided to come and say hi to me at this event, which was in a parking lot because it was COVID year. And I knew the speaker after. I'd worked with him in EFY back when I was an EFY counselor, and my son stayed for the talk. And I'm not going to name names, but that was a very problematic talk. And eventually, I guess this leader kept giving this talk and he was actually kind of reprimanded for some of the things he said in the talk because they were offensive to some. And my son was at that talk, and it was just not the right talk for him to be at. And it was kind of the message of, this church is the only way. And if you can't do it, it's like compared it to sinking of the Titanic. I mean, it was like pretty bad. And that was the night, one of the nights my son almost took his life. And so I had a really loud conversation in the car that night in prayer, where I was pretty vocal and pretty upset about what had happened. And I had a very strong thought come to me: you need to write this down, and you need to send it to that man and everyone else he works with. And I was like, "Whoa, okay." And that's sure. Yeah. I was like, okay. And then that's when the book started showing up. It would show up to me, and it's poetry actually, which I hadn't written poetry that much before, but it showed up in conversations. I called it conversations because it felt like conversations. And some of the book is actual conversations we had with people. And two of the excerpts from it are actually conversations I had with that general authority. And so it's kind of a real-time play out of our experience and what happened. And some of it's very painful. And I sat on it for a year after. I didn't want to do anything with it. It was way too raw and personal. And then and I didn't want my son to see it. He wasn't in a, I wasn't sure he was secure enough mentally with his health yet to read it. But after time went by, then I had another strong impression that it was time to show him. And I did. And I said, I was told to send this to these leaders. How do you feel? He said, go ahead. Like he had no problem with me sending it to the leaders. And I did. And then the voice came back and said, now it's time for you to publish it. And I was like, no, I don't want to do that. And it just wouldn't go away. And the second I finally said, okay, I talked to him, he was fine with it. And then all these random little miracles started happening, because to get a book ready for publication, you have to have a publisher, you have to have cover art, you have to do all these things. And everything came to me so clearly. And there's just all these amazing little miracle stories. Like J. Kirk Richards is my favorite artist. And I had this very clear vision of what the cover needed to look like. And it was his artwork. And I didn't know him.
Wow, that is so awesome.
But I reached out, and I kept getting told, you need to find him and ask him to do this. And I didn't want to. And then I went on his Instagram and saw his mother-in-law had just died, and I didn't want to bother him. So I fought the urge, but J. Kirk Richards was going through his mother-in-law's death, but then it just wouldn't go away. Like, you need to reach out to him. So I did that day. And I said, you don't know me, but this is who I am. We both volunteer for Encircle, which is a support center for LGBTQ. And I kind of knew him through that anyway. And I said, I wrote a book and I'm just wondering if you would do the artwork for it. And he just right away got back to me and said, yes. And this is a man who sells these paintings that he does for a lot of money. And he's very successful and very busy, and very sought after. But anyway, he just was amazing and he created something that was like out of a dream. It was just the most beautiful artwork. And then I had to get music rights.
It's awesome. Yeah.
And then I had to get music rights from Janice Cat Perry for, I quote one of her little primary songs in the book. And I was terrified about that. And it happens to be, she has 2 gay sons. And
isn't it amazing the way the stars align, even when something seems so scary as publishing your words, which is really your heart. It's really putting yourself out there.
Yeah. And so every dollar from the book goes to Encircle. It goes to the therapy, life-saving therapy that they offer for LGBTQ kids. So because of that, I do encourage people to buy it. I normally don't tell people to go buy my work, but with this book, the every dollar, we've been able to raise several $1,000s for Encircle, which has been wonderful. And I usually just
wonderful.
Yeah. So the book has hit some people. I've definitely connected with people across the world who've read it, and it's been a beautiful experience. And I did actually receive letters back from several of the leadership in the LDS faith. Some of it surprised me. When you send something out that's quite raw, and the hardest words to read in it are actually words that they've said, not words I've said. So I wasn't worried I get in trouble per se, but it's pretty point blank. And
I was actually just going to ask you, I was going to keep it real and just ask you in this moment, Autumn, that takes a lot of guts to put that out there. And there is this fear about being ejected from the tribe, so to speak. It's there. It's very real. And you moved past it, obviously. But I just want to honor that and acknowledge it. I totally understand with everything. I relate completely. I never, ever in my life saw myself spilling my heart out in a podcast on a regular basis. But I get what you're saying when you feel that divine pull, that divine guidance.
Yeah. And the night I actually finished the book, and I kept having these phases of, okay, I'd hear these okay, you did it. Okay, you did it. But it wasn't actually, I sent it through probably the wimpy way. I sent it through email to the leadership.
Wimpy?
Knowing they don't read their emails probably. I thought, this is a way, because I was told to send it to the leadership by this voice, and I was like, oh, that's scary. So I sent it by email and I didn't hear back. I did hear back from local leaders, but not them. But then I thought I was done after that. And after we published it, and then the voice came back, you didn't do what you were supposed to do. You're supposed to send the book. And so I actually went and mailed 40 copies individually to the leadership offices. And when I did that, I walked away and I heard that voice, and it said, you're finished. You're done. You did it. And so my job with the book was done. And now it's this funny thing, because it's I do love the book. I don't feel like I wrote it still. I feel like I was supposed to type it, but it came from a different source. But I felt like, check, I did that. I'm done. Okay. Now what? Can I go on vacation? But anyway.
I love it. I'll leave a link in my show notes about where folks can purchase it, so that those funds will go to Encircle. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for leaning into the hard and the uncomfortable. I just have this question that just keeps popping up, and I feel like I should ask. You talked about your son being so young when he just knew how he identified. And it's not lost on me how many in the LDS faith have no problem believing that a boy is at 14. Joseph Smith had the experiences that are recorded in history. And you also mentioned it was at about the age of 14 that your son really started to have questions about God and how God fit in. You said scientifically, and how by the time your son came out at 17, you just knew there was no way. He was making it up. And sometimes I think parents, particularly of a conservative faith background, I think some of their upbringing, the messaging, contributes to that initial response of, how can that be? Or I don't know if my child knows what they're really talking about, or, the disbelief maybe that comes up. What thoughts or words of advice can you offer to parents? Some who are listening may not even know yet that they have a child who identifies as LGBTQ plus in some way. We're at a place where we can realize any discomfort that's coming from us. That's coming from that ownership is completely on our shoulders, but it's hard to acknowledge and sometimes hard to see it. So for parents who are maybe earlier on or don't even know that they're on this journey yet, what thoughts or advice would you offer?
So one of the most beautiful words of advice I got was from a veteran in this space whose daughter, grandson, and two of her siblings are LGBTQ. And she told me, she said, this is right after our son came out. She goes, you may find you'll wake up every day for 6 months and cry every day. And then all of a sudden one day you won't cry anymore. And you'll see all this beauty. And about 2 years in, you're going to wake up one day and go, this is the best thing that ever happened to us. And
that's so true.
Right? And she told me that probably a couple weeks in. And I was like, no, that's not going to be. And of course, that's exactly how it went. And I would say my tears every day when I woke up were never, because of what I've explained before, they were never like, oh, my son's gay. And I do know that so many parents do have a learning curve or a coming of age of themselves where that is something they reckon with. And they recognize, especially people who are very, see things very linearly and
black and white. Mm-hmm.
Right. I totally recognize that's a real thing. For us, it was more just like the tears were for like, why this perfect child? Why does he have to have a harder life? Because I just knew it would be a harder life for him. And he
not harder because of how they identify, but harder because of the way that they're treated.
Exactly.
I'm assuming that's what you mean.
Oh, of course. Yes.
Just want to make sure that's clear. Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. The harder. Yeah. He's very fine with who he is. That's not a problem. But the idea that like, it's hard for him to go to certain events because he is afraid that there might be that so-and-so there who once dropped a cooler on his head at the beach and in a way that felt deliberate. And this person has spoken out against our family. It's more things like that, which is a real story. So, it's like, he just has this trauma he has to carry with him, which doesn't feel fair because he's such an amazing human being. But I would have these special moments privately once I hit the 2-year mark of, oh, this is the best thing that's ever happened to us. We love bigger, deeper. You really do. You meet people who love wide open, just so great. But I've had so many little things come that have reminded me about the sacrifices of great humans throughout earth, how often they are not because that person needed to go through it, but because the rest of us had to.
Yes.
And just saying that now, saying that now sometimes makes me feel bad. Like, if my son had to suffer anything because I needed to learn a lesson, or, someone in our family had to learn a lesson, if his life was harder because of that, like, it just like makes me honor him more. And I know he's the type of person who probably would sign up for something that would help somebody else in a way. And so I'm so grateful to him for the lessons he's taught us. And I just think of like the great people who've gone before and made sacrifices so that others could be stronger. And of course, we can't help but think about Jesus Christ and, sacrifice. And I've always loved that scripture. Mary kept all these things and pondered them in her heart. That's always been a big scripture in my life. And it certainly is in this experience that like the mother of a precious child who was sent here to teach people something and walk a more unique path. Like what an amazing calling it is to be that parent of that child.
Definitely. For sure. Yeah, that evokes the emotion. I've had similar thoughts about my child. I know that they are an amazing spirit. You just know it. Wow. I would so love to talk more. I've so enjoyed this so much, and I appreciate your insight. I appreciate your openness and your willingness to just tell your story. I really believe that's what's going to bring change, one story at a time. And I know that's why you do what you do with Lift in Love and with the groups that you have in your home and the speakers that you bring in. It's literally one soul at a time, starting with my own back in the beginning of this journey. Well, I have, my final question that I always like to ask all of my guests. It feels very selfish at this point because the insight and the answers that are given are just mind-blowing. But what does it mean to you to live beyond the shadow of doubt?
I like that question. And when I think of it, images of course come to mind, like a swirly cloud of dust and debris, and that, the shadow, it seems scary. And for me, the image that comes to mind when I think about that is actually a wall of fear. And you think about the stages of grief, you go through stages of grief, and there's a place where you're angry. And I think sometimes people hover in the shadow of doubt or the lurkiness. For me, there was a point where I became angry, and it was literally a brick wall. Like the image that comes to mind is like this brick wall, this here. And the image that my son, Gavin, he got a black belt in Taekwondo. He was a Taekwondo kid. And the image to me is like kicking down that wall and destroying that wall so that there's a clear space there that you get to redefine. And so many of us in this space deconstruct. And for me, my deconstruction was gradual in some ways and then immediate with that stage of grief of anger. And so I don't know that I necessarily hovered in a murky cloud for a while. It was more about abrupt boom. What are we going to do to fix this? What can I do to create comfort and space? And the words that have replaced this like wall of fear now are liberation, autonomy, and integrity. So for me, it's living with the liberation of knowing God is much bigger than we've made them. Like God is much, much bigger. We cannot put God in this box or this wall.
Absolutely.
So much bigger. And then autonomy is that I am an independent spiritual being who's completely able to have divine revelation personally that might look different from other people's. And I can trust the promptings I receive that might be different than what we've heard over pulpits. And that's just been liberating. And then lastly, integrity, just living with integrity. And integrity is a personal thing. Everyone's life looks different. I absolutely revere and respect other people's paths. And, there's people in so many different faiths that it works for them, and that faith works for them, and this works for them. And my path definitely looks different than most of the people I know. But for me, it's about tapping into the true integrity of where I'm supposed to be, believing and doing and saying what, and being honest with that. And when I live with those things as my cruxes of like principled living, I find so much peace and joy. So that's what I would say is just to try to focus on, like, if you're in this space and you've gone through some sort of stage of grief, just liberate yourself, knock it down, rebuild the way with what works for you. For me, it's just Jesus. That's my motto for rebuilding, just Jesus. And you'll find yourself in a place of autonomy where you're making your own decisions and living with integrity.
Oh my goodness. I love that so much. Just Jesus. I'm going to have that wall in my mind for a while now. That's a great analogy. Thank you so, so much, Autumn. Just really quickly, so our listeners can get to know you a little bit, looking for 1 or 2 word answers with these questions. You may or may not know that I throw them out at the end if you've listened to any other episodes. Tell us what your favorite book is. You can use your own if you want.
I will say writing my book was my favorite, one of my favorite life experiences, but I read a lot, and it's more, can I say favorite author maybe?
Yeah,
Because
do.
I have like 9 authors I love who all start with the letter A, which is kind of funny, but like I love Anne Lamott. I love Alice Sebold. I love Anne Enright and Patchett. I'm trying to think like, and I love Leanne Moriarty books. Those are fun. So.
Oh, fun. What about, are you an introvert or an extrovert?
I'm a very social introvert. I would
Really? You are
always
good.
be alone, like always, but I love people. I do love the people in my life. I have really good people in my life. So I do love to be with them, but I'm always mentally going, when do I get to go home and be by myself?
Yes, I relate to that. Okay, who is your favorite artist? You said J. Kirk Richards a little bit earlier.
Yeah, visually, I love his work right now. Musically, I love, I just saw them last week in concert. Coldplay, U2, those are spiritual bands to me. Yeah,
they totally are. Agreed. Are you a night owl or a morning lark?
definitely a night owl.
And
Most people get emails from me at 4 a.m. So it's not because I woke up at 4 a.m.
That's hilarious. And do you have a celebrity crush?
Oh yeah. Oh my, who doesn't? I have a candle on my desk that someone gave me, and they're my MVP because it says smells like Chris Hemsworth. And I'm like, you know me well. No one beats Chris Hemsworth. And if you want to argue to the death of me, I will take anyone down.
That's awesome. Yeah, that's a fun question. And what about still or carbonated water, or do you do diet soda? There you go. I see it. Our listeners can't see it. She's got her Diet Coke in her cup.
Diet Dr. Pepper.
Diet Dr. Pepper. I love that too. Have you had the strawberries and cream?
So I like that one, but I really like the cream soda one. The zero sugar cream soda.
Yes.
That's the best.
Yum. And what about the furthest place you've traveled? I know you've traveled a lot, but tell us the furthest.
I need a geography expert to correct me here. So we actually have been to the 7 continents, and I don't know whether Antarctica or India is further away from California. I'm in California. So what do you think? I don't know. Do you have a globe? Probably Antarctica.
To me, Antarctica seems furthest from anywhere.
It's the most unique place I've ever been.
It is true. It is true.
Have you been there? It's incredible.
No, I haven't figured out how we can do it unless it's just a cruise that goes around the southern part of South America. Is that what you did?
You either have to have a science vessel, which is really hard to apply for, or do the cruise, and it goes through 7 countries, the Falkland Islands, 7 South American countries, the Falkland Islands, then to Antarctica. And it's a spiritual experience. It's like, it's otherworldly there. There's a quiet there that you don't realize we're missing in this part of the world. It's phenomenal.
I bet. I have to convince my family to try another cruise. The first one, a couple of them got sick. So I think Antarctica would be worth it though.
It is. I do have to warn people who get seasick. Going through the Cape Horn is one of the rockiest seas, and you do have to go through it, and you are doing this for a night. So it is kind of rough, but it's pretty fun.
So this isn't a question I normally ask my guests, but I just have to know. You talked about in your youth, you were in front of the camera, and now as an adult, you're behind the camera. What was your acting as a youth in front of the camera? It's
so embarrassing, Megan. I was mainly a model. So I did a lot in runway, but I was in commercials. And then I did theater though. I loved theater, and I'm proud that I was part of the theater. I love writing plays. I love theater, but yeah, since I worked as a filmmaker behind, and which I'm way more comfortable.
What's embarrassing about that? I think that's great. I love it. Well, if folks wanted to connect with you, what would be the easiest way? Social media, email? Do you have a website?
I do. Well, my business website is sidegigproductions.com, but really in this space, I would say Instagram's the best way. I think I'm public. Yeah. And it's just Autumn McAlpin at Instagram.
Okay. I will leave that in the show notes. Thank you again so much.
Of course. Thank you so much for having me and for all the beautiful work you do.
My pleasure. A 17-year-old boy entered his parents' bedroom to reveal a truth he'd been navigating alone for years. In his confession, he not only came out as gay, but also conveyed the depths of the mental health struggles he'd been battling as a result of conflicting messaging he'd endured in the religious institution in which he'd been raised. Autumn McAlpin's haunting literary memoir, But Jesus, A Conversation, replays the various conversations that emerged during one family's coming out story. But Jesus, A Conversation takes us on a journey of a family deconstructing with the use of a compass and their conscience, and reconstructing with the salve that will help bind them the most of all, love. With stunning cover art by J. Kirk Richards, this book intends to offer an open shoulder for all families who find themselves at the intersection of LDS or other conservative faith and LGBTQ+. Published by Pink Umbrella Publishing, the proceeds from the sales of this book will be donated to life-saving therapy programs for the LGBTQ+ community through 501c3 nonprofit Encircle. This would be a thoughtful and heartfelt gift this time of year or any time of year. Links to buy the book on Amazon or Barnes & Nobles are in the show notes. Hopeful Spaces is a Dallas Hope Charities component of Hopeful Discussions, sponsored by Mercedes-Benz Financial Services USA. It's a free monthly parent, ally, or caregiver support group facilitated by Megan Skidmore Coaching. Email chc@dallashopecharities.org for more info. Visit meganskidmorecoaching.com to find this podcast and additional free resources, including the link for a complimentary coaching session. Follow me on Facebook or Instagram for more, or to send me a DM. Help the podcast grow. Please follow, review, and share with a friend.